Hello, welcome back. It's gonna be a brew talk today. I'm gonna keep this one short and simple because I'm kind of congested today from allergies, and it is what it is. So I want to talk briefly today about mashing for new homebrewers, old homebrewers, whatever. But I want to break it down into what I think is the easiest explanation for mashing. And hopefully you can't hear my neighbors arguing. But basically, there's a lot more detail that you could go over, so keep that in mind. I'm not going to cover everything. This is going to be very short and hopefully very simple. So at its base, you've got your grain that you've milled that has all the goodness in it. And sorry, I am distracted. My neighbors are yelling. My dogs are their dogs are barking. I don't know what's going on outside, but it's mayhem. At any rate, you've got your grain. You mill the grain, as I was saying, and then you get the starch on the inside. It's basically the flour. When that mixes with hot water, it converts to complex sugars. Well, it converts the complex sugars into simple sugars. And that's what we're looking for, because the yeast needs to eat sugar. That sounded much more complex than it needed to be. Hot water, grain, sugar. Yeah. So how does it work though? Well, as you're heating it, right, you are releasing enzymes that are in the grain, and the enzymes are what are breaking down those complex sugars into simple sugars. And at its very base, depending on what temperature you've heated to, will release different enzymes. In my opinion, there's really only two that you need to worry about if we're keeping this simple, and maybe one runner-up to think about. All right. There's just a lot of groups at all those various temperatures. The first one is beta amylase. Beta amylase happens between 131 and 150 Fahrenheit. And this creates maltose, right? So if you are mashing at this lower temperature, you get, more fermentable sugar. So you should end up with a lower final gravity, because there's mostly fermentable sugars in that. There'll be a little bit that aren't, but mostly it's fermentable. So if you're struggling to hit final gravities, you want to stay within that range and just keep playing with that and go a little lower each time until you hit, a happy medium for your setup. So the next one, as you're raising the temperature up, is alpha amylase. That's 154 Fahrenheit to 162 Fahrenheit. Now, alpha amylase has a lot more unfermentable sugar in it. So if you're mashing at that higher temperature range, you're going to have more unfermentable sugar, which means at the end of everything, the yeast won't be able to ferment all of it because there'll be some of it that's not fermentable, which means that the sugar that's still there in your beer that you couldn't ferment makes your beer maltier and sweeter. And if that's what you want, then you want to mash it at higher temperature, right? I kind of left out a little bit here so I went from 150 to 154 Fahrenheit, and I didn't talk about that. That's just the middle ground. You're going to get both beta and alpha amylase in that sort of range. And that's why a lot of times if you read books, they'll talk about how you should mash at like 153 Fahrenheit, somewhere like right in the middle, to get a little bit of both worlds, but in my opinion, for me at least, and you have to decide what works for you. I like to ferment at a slightly lower temperature than that, but that's what works for me. So what else can I tell you? There is one more range that some people like to do. I don't think there's any point in doing it. It was like it was something that people did before we had such modified grains that we had to really work hard at getting the sugars and stuff out of them. There's something called a protein rest. So it is possible that some people might still do this. I don't think it, like I said, I think the benefit is pretty low. But if you mash, like if you start your mash at 100 to 120 Fahrenheit and leave it there for about 20 minutes, that's your protein rest. And it just basically starts breaking down the grain and gelatinizing it, and it improves your efficiency a little bit, a very little bit. But otherwise, I don't see any point in really doing that. But that is maybe the runner-up as far as, you know, the third temperature range, right? You could start at that low temperature range to kind of get stuff broken in and then raise it up to your normal mash temperature. The only other thing I will mention before I let you go is that you may come across a term that you've not heard of called saccharification. I don't know why they have to put fancy words on stuff, but that is the name or the word that describes converting the starch in your grain into sugar. That's the saccharification. So if you come across that in, you know, a recipe or something, that's just somebody trying to be fancy, and that's all that means. Anyway, I'll be back in another week for another video here, and until then, I hope that you keep on brewing. See you soon.